Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So welcome to Shop Talk. The general idea of Shop Talk is that it's Monday, it's after work, we're kicking back, we're going to talk about a few topics, talking shop, if you will. And along the way, we'll answer some questions from chat. This is technically a chat-driven program. And the whole idea is if you've got questions on the data platform space, drop them in chat. Let's talk about them. We actually do have a question that came in via email, and I will address that question. Probably I'll give it a few minutes just to make sure that the poor soul who sent the email is in chat and ready to go. So we'll hold off on that. If, however, you have your own questions in chat, get them in. We'll talk about it. Otherwise, we do have a few topics of interest. There might be a rant. We'll find out if there's a rant. I mean, the spoiler is you can get me to rant pretty much any time. So we're not going to have to think too hard about, well, will there be a rant? I mean, this is not Betteridge's Law of Headlines. This is probably a yes. Speaking of probably a yes, we have with us the one and only Mala. How you doing, Mala?
Doing well. Good evening, everyone. Seems like a quiet evening. Not anyone up there yet.
Yeah, we have to go wake people up, get them out of their coffins, say chop chop, shop talk has started. In fairness, I did kick this off. I kicked the stream off a little bit late, so there was about half a minute to get prepared for shop talk. I was looking back at the clock that's behind me, that clock over there. So when I'm looking over this way, I'm probably looking at the clock. It just turned 6 o'clock over there, so it's a couple of minutes late. Speaking of a couple of minutes late, we have
Mike is back.
from the Witness Protection Program, apparently still in the Witness Protection Program, the Haloed Mike Christensen, who is currently frozen, possibly by Mr. Freeze. And unfortunately, given Mike's luck, it is probably the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of Mr. Freeze. So he had a large Austrian man freeze him and then give a terrible pun. And that's why Mike is currently not moving. It's very unfortunate. We are going to start a GoFundMe to give Mike a space heater so that he can recover. But his dignity, he will unfortunately never be able to recover. So no matter how much money, precious money you donate to Mike's quest to get out of the frozen wilderness and or Witness Protection Program. But we are glad to have Mike back. Now, Mike may or may not have been able to hear any of this, and that's half the fun. We don't even know. There might be signs of life. I can barely see him moving, given the camera fuzziness and all the wackiness that's going on his screen. But that gave us.
Maybe he's still at Boston and they're having an early winter.
I mean, that's possible. He might have gotten snowed inside of his room. There could have been local weather conditions, sort of like the Boeing plant, where the Boeing aircraft facility up in north of Seattle. I wanted to say Renton, but I'm not positive it's there. But north of Seattle, the Boeing aircraft plant is large enough that it has its own weather patterns. So there are sections of the facility that will rain. And so that's kind of fun. Mike has re-entered the Witness Protection Program, but that's okay. He'll probably come back. And if he does come back, we're going to do this whole shtick again because we're currently vamping. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why are we vamping? And the answer is, actually, I don't know. We probably should just get started with the show. So we've got a few topics. We've got a few things to talk about. And I think I'm going to mess around with the order just a little bit. We are going to start off with something I haven't read. That's usually the best way to have things go. Is here's a thing that Kevin hasn't read, and we're just going to try to get reactions. This is now a reaction podcast. Let's share screen. We've got this up. This is the ultimate checklist for database reliability engineers. And actually, there is a decent question up in front. I'm dropping the link in chat right here. The question is, well, how is this different from a database administrator? And that's a good question, because I was thinking to myself, come on, are you just doing the statistician thing where we're just going to rename ourselves data science and make more money? The answer might be yes. Let's find out. So I already held the DBRE title, but didn't realize it was an established role. So site reliability engineering, database administration, database engineering, database development, database administration, making sure stuff's not broken. Session showed me I was not alone. Okay, so let's talk about this. So she does. The author does link to a Kindra little article on the difference between the three roles. I'll pop that open just in case we want to look at that in just a little bit. But most database reliability engineers start as database administrators or have their foundation in there. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because we've got to be able to configure systems. You have to understand how to tell that they're up, how to tell when they're down, and have some feeling for the various options. Backups, restorations, performance tuning, job maintenance. Okay, those are core database administration tools and tasks, so that makes sense. Now, reliability engineering. Well, service level agreements, SLOs, SLIs. It would have been nice to explain those, because I know SLA, but service level objectives and service level I don't knows. The service level I don't know is where you go to the manager, like, hey, what service level should you have? And it's like, well, I don't know. We've got an SLI.
I think a service level indicator, Kadir.
It might be. I don't know.
I just Googled it. I'm not pretending that I knew about it. I just Googled, and service level indicator seems more appropriate. Yeah, I think maybe
quite possibly. Although I will say I was in management, so that actually could have been a service level. I don't know. Incident management, learn how to talk to people. I guess that makes sense. Postmortems, blameless retrospectives that focus on systems, not people. Okay. Those things, there's nothing on there I think that is strongly differentiating, like, oh, this is something a DBA absolutely would not do. Here, I think, is where we start getting into, DBAs don't do this as much. So declarative infrastructure, all right, that's something that you don't tend to see a lot of from database administrators as such. Whether you should or not is a different question. I think the answer is yes, DBAs ought to know how to script out the deployment of systems. For example, SQL Server has for decades, literal decades, more than 20 years, had the ability to take a configuration file and run a command and install from a batch script SQL Server. So you can pre-configure your SQL Server instance, take that configuration file, execute a batch script that you write, and then end up with one installed version of SQL Server later, or an error. And if you go click next in the installer, that's actually what you're doing. The installer is just a shell over that configuration process. Meaning that, you could do that yourself. So I think this is a good thing for a DBA to know about. Version control, treating infrastructure changes like code. Again, these are things that I think normal DBAs are not doing, but could benefit from. Automation and scripting. Oh, go ahead.
Fully agree, I said. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you're doing something manually more than twice, script it. I know the sentiment. I recognize the sentiment. I don't know. I think I get the why, and I can understand in a piece like this making that as a practical principle. I don't fully agree. And the reason I don't fully agree is you have to know the trade-off between the level of challenge in creating the script and the reduction of time. How much time are you spending on this task? If it is go click a button once in the middle of your workday every 6 months, if I have to spend 12 hours developing something that clicks that button, not worth it. Even if I have to click the button once every week.
The other trade-off, I think, and some people may not agree, is that with a script that you probably created 6 months ago and you want to do that again, you might not remember how much of what you want to do is actually done by that script, or it may be doing small things even that are different from what you want the third time.
Yes. So that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Having to document things, making sure that you've automated as much of that process as possible and documented the remainder.
Mhm.
I'm going to pivot this into a joke with Python about the scripting trade-off. Okay, Solomon's got something. Solomon is going to be writing in detail. So I will explain Python here for a moment and then give my joke, which I'm already telling that I'm going to tell a joke. So it probably won't be funny at that point. But
While
okay.
you tell the joke, I'm going to go get something and be right back.
All right. So Python, great for automation, monitoring scripts, API integrations. I fully agree with that. I think Python is a very solid language for that. But going back to what Mala was saying, hey, if you try this again 6 months from now, you may not remember. Well, if you try running your Python script 6 months from now, it's probably broken because 3 of the libraries that you've updated have backwards dependencies that are broken. And as a result, you have to spend another 6 hours trying to troubleshoot why your script failed. And it turns out that, oh, well, we can't do this with pandas greater than 2.2.2, except that this other library needs pandas 2.2.3 or later in order to work. So you have to rewrite it in a totally different way using a totally different library. And by the time you're done with it, there's another 12 hours that you've spent. Welcome to development in Python. Or alternatively, you just decide that you're never going to update your Python packages at all, and then everything's fine, right? Everything's fine until the inevitable security vulnerability sneaks its way through. So, welcome back from witness protection and or the frozen depths of your room there, Mike. The one and only Mike Christensen, who is currently alive and has in fact given us the thumbs up, indicating that he does have enough life to him. That means that I, as I'm talking like this, am making sure that we do not get a copyright claim hit on us.
No, it's pre-copyright rules. It's like that's why they use it in the movie. Welcome, but thank you for having me. I'm sorry, I was having technical issues.
That's all right. It's all right. When you were coming in, it was all fuzzy and looked frosty. So
it was my virtual machine, which made it way worse. So
that's fair. We just assumed that you were hit by Mr. Freeze's freeze ray, but it was unfortunately the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of Mr. Freeze. So he told you a really bad pun, and then it just ruined your dignity for life. We were starting a GoFundMe. We may still have the GoFundMe just to skim a little off the top, but
I'll take it.
Yeah. So Solomon says,
you're frozen. Yeah,
exactly. At Channel Advisor, RIP, there was a maintenance task that I was asked to execute every other month or so. It required taking customer data, adapting the data for insert versus update versus delete. I asked if we could just spend a little bit of dev and UI time to allow customers, or at least support, to upload the file so I didn't have to do the menial work. And I'm going to guess that the answer was no, because it would take too much effort to implement. And
Didn't that?
Yeah. This is the downside to working in a Scrum team, where, especially one where you don't have a minimum percentage of. It wasn't worth it due to opportunity cost. Too much effort for something we didn't often need. Mm-hmm. Yeah, until the time comes when you go to do the thing and you forgot how to do the thing, or something else is broken in the meantime, or whatever. I totally understand both sides of this, and I guess my position that I would take on it is, I want local explanation. I want local decision making. I want as close to the decision as possible, and making that trade-off, understanding that opportunity cost of, am I willing to put this time in place for automation? Do I expect to get a positive trade-off? And can I calculate out, like, what would be the return on investment? After we were done, executions of the script happen bi-weekly, if not weekly. That is a fair point, where something that you're doing on a specific cadence, the choice of that cadence may actually have been based on limitations of, well, I have to do this and it's going to take this much time, so I can do it every other month. But maybe you can do it faster, and it could benefit from being faster, and that would be an argument in favor of automating that particular task. So I certainly do not want to make it sound like I am anti-automation in general, or that I am on this side of, if you do it more than twice, script it. Because I think there are reasons why you might not want to. And generally, they do come down to how much effort and how big that trade-off is. And so, yeah, it's a solid point, Solomon, that, hey, the only reason that we were doing it once every 2 months was because people were holding back because they didn't have a database engineer to run this script. So that does make sense. And I'm a DBA. We don't even manage infrastructure. We mainly manage performance tuning, part of databases, and some maintenance. We don't have console access either. I do want to expand horizon to learn this automating infrastructure.
What do you mean by you don't have console access if you're a DBA?
Might not be able to access, like, say, access the servers directly. So you might be able to access these database instance, let's say SQL Server or Postgres or whatever, but might not be able to get shell access to the server or be able to RDP into the machine.
Right.
And that's quite common, especially at larger companies, where the larger the company gets, the more likely they're going to silo people into very, very small roles. And so that can be a challenge.
That's not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
after I got hired, they created a role after I got there, after I dropped a bunch of tables that I wasn't supposed to. So, yikes.
So yeah, getting into some more of these things, Bash or PowerShell or shell scripting in general, I think those are good for DBAs to know in general. So another thing where, yeah, I don't consider this to be a major separator. In practice, yes, it is a separator, where there are a lot of database administrators who are afraid of or do not want to mess with shell scripting.
Yes.
And I think that's not great. I think it is important as a database administrator to have at least enough familiarity that you can futz about, especially
DBA
with SQL Server and PowerShell. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
DBA checks, DBA tools.
Exactly, yeah. To be able to use modules like that, or to write your own simple PowerShell scripts, because in a lot of cases, a fairly simple PowerShell script can solve a problem that might take a significant amount of time otherwise. So that is good tooling that I think we should promote for any database administrator. Although, going back to Rohit's point, that kind of depends on having shell access.
Uh-huh.
The CI/CD pipelines, this is, I think, this is an area where, again, this is going to separate a DBA from a DBRE. Same thing with Ansible playbooks. Getting into Docker and Kubernetes, useful for DBAs. I can see an argument that you're really pushing into the database reliability engineer with this. Version control, I think as a DBA, you should understand how to do this.
Right.
Yeah, you may not be writing a lot of the SQL scripts, the stored procedures, tables, views, etc., but you should at least understand. And yeah, I agree. You should be able to deal with CI/CD pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be the person creating the pipelines, And if you are, awesome. I guess the point that I'm getting at in all of this is, this is a good article that lays out a lot of ideas of what you might want to have in a database reliability engineer. And the point that I'm trying to levy here is, I think a lot of these skills are database administrator skills that a lot of database administrators just aren't learning, and that they should learn because they're very useful skills to have, regardless of whether you would want to consider yourself a database reliability engineer or not. And Radio Guy here's...
I would also weigh in on what Radio Guy is saying on being too busy fixing broken jobs and stuff because of broken app code. Been there, seen that, and still goes on, where it's very hard to get off the train and try to focus on learning something. And you have my sympathies there. That's very common, sad.
Yeah, I will give a piece of advice that I got from Sean McCown quite a while ago, and that is, you are the only person who is ever going to give you permission to learn. Your boss probably will not. If you have a good boss, your boss may come in and say, I want you to learn. Go take some time to learn. Most people do not have a boss that will do that. Most people, it'll be, okay, well, let me give you some stuff, and then you kind of figure out how to learn. And so you're the only person who's going to be able to help you learn. For that reason, the advice that Sean has given, and that I try to practice as well, is take time every day and learn. Dedicate 30 minutes or 1 hour if you can get away with it. Yeah, no problem. I do working on mastering indexes this week. Awesome. Yeah, so great. That is excellent. And I don't want to say, no, you need to go learn PowerShell right now. You're probably going to have a solid idea of what makes sense for you to learn. And understanding indexes better, absolutely, great idea. But to finish up the point for people who are listening to this later, or anybody else in here, basically, take some time. Nobody has to know. You spend
2 Pomodoros, 50 minutes, 225.
Yes, I would say somewhere between 30 minutes and 1 hour. Take that time every day, dedicate it to learning something that will help you either in this job or in a future job. And if you need to, set up a meeting. There may be production emergencies or something that you're just not going to be able to get around. But sometimes you can find a time early in the day, late in the day. Find a time when people are least likely to hit you up with things. Now, if you're working a support role and you're just working at that call desk and you're getting calls left and right, that's a challenge. This advice may not apply as much. But for most of us, we kind of work siloed enough that you could sneak 30 minutes of reading about PowerShell or reading about indexing or reading about some other process and practicing. And it's still valuable because you're still building up those skills. But that'd be 30 minutes that you're not scrolling Twitter or Facebook or...
I've met people that... So in my career, I have met people that... So I worked in a call center when I was younger, and I would have, 70, 80 calls a day. I had met people that would go in lunch and go in their car and go on their phone or iPad and learn stuff, because they were passionate about learning something new, and they might have, worked at Amazon and then in a fulfillment warehouse and then learned how to do coding and other stuff. So,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to be driven.
Yeah. So, and I think, at the end of the day, you're going to be the person who has to be able to set that pace. That nobody else is going to really look out for you and set that for you. In general, there are exceptions. Those exceptions are a smaller percentage. I think there's a fairly decent percentage of managers who kind of want you to, but they're not going to go out and tell you, hey, I need you to take an hour and an hour a day and just learn stuff. I don't want you working on other stuff. Just go learn. Sometimes you will find those managers, and those tend to be.
You guys have met Nelda, right? At the
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike was
she's
talking
awesome.
about at the SQL Saturday Raleigh. Yeah, she was going around basically telling the employees, no, you go to sessions, you go learn these things, and that's awesome.
Right.
All right, no problem there. Okay, my decision, and the boss supports me on anything I do. It's a good place to be, but I am the only DBA in the shop. Yeah, that's fair. And in those cases, it can be difficult. I don't want to sugarcoat that. A lot of the time, it's can you knuckle down and just set up a meeting? And again, production emergency is going to trump this. Understood. But in general, people will always find a way to take up your time.
Right.
Your time is free.
Uh-huh.
So that's where it may be a challenge. It may be difficult, but I think it's worthwhile. Small group looking at experimenting. Yeah, there can be specific community channels, but Mal is absolutely right. We don't have anything ourselves, but the SQL Server community is usually pretty solid, and you might find other groups. I'm not too familiar with any off the top of my head that would fit what you're looking to do. So yeah, the SQL Server community is probably the best place where you'd find some like-minded people. There's probably a Slack channel there somewhere. I haven't been in there for a few years, not for any negative reasons, just not had a lot of time. But usually, you can probably find some channel with some number of people and even propose the idea or look at what people are doing for tools and reach out. I know that there are some open source SQL Server related developers who want to encourage additional pull requests, who want to encourage additional people to assist. And there are other people who really want this is my work. So that would probably be my high level suggestion would be check out that Slack group and see if there are any channels for tools or for open source or for something else like that. And you might be able to even ask the question on there if you find a reasonable looking channel, and see if there are people who are working on open source projects who would like some assistance. Because that's really going to depend on the individual. Some of them absolutely want it. Some of them are like, no, this is my baby. I just want to run it myself.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Databases, cloud databases, not so cloud databases. And there are, it looks like, quite a few other things in here. But as I scroll through this list, I know I'm not saying anything out loud, but I'm quickly scrolling through this list and saying, there's not a whole lot that I would look at and say, this is what a database reliability engineer does that a database administrator absolutely wouldn't do. And most of this stuff kind of saying, this is what database administrators do. So to me, it feels a little bit like statistician to data scientist. Like, hey, I want to make more money by doing 95% the same work and 5% different.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't want to poo-poo the article. I will say this set of items is very solid. I don't know that I have anything off the top of my head where I would say, no, database reliability engineers need to do these things in addition. But about 90...
I mean, to me, it's only the same title for the same job that DBA used to do. I don't see that as two different jobs. So I don't know.
If you want to change the title and give me more money, that is great.
Right.
That is fine.
Right.
I'm all for that. And the question was, is this from Amy Abel? Yes. All right. So Next article. Actually, let's skip from articles to. Have you asked what AI thinks a database reliability engineer is or does?
Well, let me look.
No, because
That's a good question. Let
I
me
don't really
ask.
care.
You hate it so much.
I do. But while Mike and Mala are looking that up, just for laughs. Okay, that's fair. Just for laughs. Giggles. I'm gonna note that we did have a shop talk question come in via email, and I want to see if said asker might be in chat. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out together. Email came in. I am not going to give the name just in case. I
it's
didn't ask
effectively
if
DBA. It's a DBA.
DBRE is a DBA. Is that what you said?
Stores that an organization's database systems are highly available, scalable, and performant, blending database expertise with software engineering and site reliability. It's a DBA. It's a DBA.
Pretty much it. It's like this is what we have historically thought of as what a good DBA does.
Right. It's all about what a good DBA does. What I got was exactly this thing.
Yeah. Okay. Question came in via email. I'm pointing this out just because, hey, actually, right now, if you look down here, email us, shoptalk@tripass.org. I actually do look at these, mostly, sometimes. And I had one, and I'm going to look at it right now. I'm not going to pull it up on screen, but had a question. I've got a vendor who sends us Parquet files. A quick Google search suggests that SQL Server's Polybase feature allows SQL Server 2022 directly to read from Parquet files without doing ELT work. Our SQL Server instance is on premises, but can't find documentation on how it works. Does it read local Parquet files or what?
Have you read Kevin's book on Polybase?
Well, that was for SQL Server 2019, so that would allow for Parquet file reading on Azure Blob Storage. 2022 did increase the quality of what you can access. But I'm going to point out, I actually have a video on the topic, and there's the link to my blog where you can click on it, and you know what? Let me show that. There we go. Now it's showing. There we are. Yes. Read local files in SQL Server with Polybase and Minio. This video, if you click on it, I'm not going to click on it, but this is the process by which you can set up Minio, which is an S3 compatible storage system. And it will allow you to pretend that you have S3 buckets on premises and will allow you to read Parquet files and ingest that data into SQL Server without having to actually use S3 or Azure Blob Storage. And I do have some links. I forget. Actually, let me pull this up and see if I have in fact updated my demos for data virtualization and SQL Server 2022 to include.
That is impressive. Wow.
I have to see if I included this or not. I think I have not included it. No, I did not include it yet. One of these years, I'll get it up to date. But this all came from actually Anthony Nocentino originally, who showed how to do this, and I took what he did right there. This is his link, backing up S3 compatible storage with SQL Server, and this one of setting up Minio. I took what he did and then I extended it a little bit. So I would recommend check out this video with this dapper fellow, and it's about 17 minutes long. Walks through the process of setting up Minio as a Docker container, and then of depositing files in there for access, and then accessing that data via SQL Server Polybase. I will note that if you just use the default in setup of Minio, the default container, and don't tweak anything, file access is not incredibly fast. there is absolutely a slowdown when reading over the network, kind of reading over the network, using HTTP as the protocol for passing along data. There is a cost doing that versus literal local read. So what you're really doing is you're standing up a server that happens to be hosted locally and doesn't have to be accessible outside of that SQL Server instance, but it is still an HTTP based hosted system. And so that's going to have some impact on how fast you can practically read Parquet files. If you're not doing this with millions of files or tens of terabytes of data, if it's occasional, people are sending me a 2 GB Parquet file or something like that, then it's a practical solution. If it's smaller than 2 gigs, it's very practical. But I did want to leave that note because there can be some pain points. All right, question here. I have a question. We are in a failover cluster environment with, say, 5 instances on 3 nodes. Can we create a SQL agent job that runs BCP to write files to some destination server? I would say there shouldn't necessarily be a reason that you couldn't. As I'm thinking about it, the trickiest parts would be making sure that the files are accessible from any node, whether you're reading from a primary, a secondary, or a different secondary. So it'd probably have to be network storage. And situations during failovers. Yeah, where you'd have to consider that during a failover, maybe loading data or executing a set of jobs. On failover, I don't remember there being any sort of explicit trigger on a failover, so that may be something you'd have to code yourself. But to execute some tasks and write files to a server, yes, I would think the answer is yes. I would say the challenge would mostly be, like I said, in ensuring that any of the replicas have access to whatever files that you need to write or to whatever core data that you need to write out. If you're writing from the data from the SQL instance out to a file someplace, that makes it easier because at that point, yeah, you've got the data already in a database. And the tricky part would be ensuring that you're only doing it in the right circumstances. Also, security of the BCP access statements. Yes, yeah. If you're reading from files from a network, then yes, you would have to make sure that whatever account this is running under has the appropriate permissions on that network share. BCP is like an operating system command. It is a command line executable program that comes with SQL Server. So, yeah, it is a utility that's in the tools folder, as I recall. And that said, I don't think there's anything too special about failover clusters that themselves would make it that you couldn't really use BCP. Is how you call this a security problem. As in the SQL agent job having enough permissions to execute BCP means that you could have arbitrary access or arbitrary shell execution. Is that what you mean, radio guy? Thought of creating a proxy and giving proper permissions. I'm just nervous of what happens during a failover. Yes. Okay. Yeah, radio guy. That's a good point. And SQL agent is a historic attack vector because it is very easy to just say, "Oh, well, let's give all the permissions," and it can be easy to accidentally over provision permissions for the SQL agent job, and that would be something you'd want to tamp down on. Yes. That's what I have. That's fair. Yes. And at the same time, some of those are permissions that are necessary. Now, creating a proxy, I'm just nervous about what happens during a failover. I think you'd have to create the proxy. I can't remember. That would be something that would be require more testing is required, because I don't think proxies get migrated over during a failover. I don't recall what in MSDB gets moved over during a failover. And so that would be something that you definitely would want to double check. But the proxy, if you're, say, proxying to an underlying Active Directory account, then provisioning the security permissions for that Active Directory account on each of the machines and to whatever network resources you would need, I think a proxy could work there. However, this is also just spitballing as I'm trying to answer a question off the cuff. Not sure about a trigger for failover events, but if it works like Cluster SQL Server, there is a dynamic management view showing which node is active, and you need to set a startup procedure or maybe a startup SQL agent job if onStart was an event to check the DMV, compare to a stored value of the active node upon prior startup. That's a pretty clever option there, Solomon. And startup stored procedure. Now, I'd say the issue maybe with a startup stored procedure would be your replicas are started up. They're just not. If you're in a failover cluster instance, the replicas, as I recall, are technically in a started state. They're just not accessible. However, Alan Hurt is somewhere tearing out his hair, and the man has beautiful enough hair that I don't want him tearing it out. So I will punt and say further research is required. I would try testing it out if you can. The proxy should work fine. Again, I am the compiler for this, and human compilation can sometimes have problems. So keep that in mind. But okay, so we had reading local files in SQL Server with Polybase and Minio. I just wanted to cover that for our dear viewer who may be viewing it. Hopefully. If not, we have a recording for a reason. Now, next thing I want to talk about. I think I'm gonna pivot again. I'm gonna pivot again to the Monty Hall problem. This is a fun article from Jason Breyer, and this is, I would argue, one of the first situations where you're in statistics, in a statistics class, and you get something that is paradoxical to the point where it really explains a feature of statistics that is not intuitive. The general idea of the Monty Hall problem is as follows. We're on Let's Make a Deal. If you don't remember Let's Make a Deal, you're probably not at least 40 years old. The original Let's Make a Deal, I think it originally aired in the 50s. Let me double check Wikipedia here, because
I remember Three's Company.
Three's Company was a bit later than that. So Let's Make a Deal started in 1963. It was most popular back in the 70s. And apparently there was a new version in 2023 and 2024. So I guess they're still around, but doesn't matter. The whole concept is you have 3 doors. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Behind one of the door, you get a car, a brand new car. The other 2 doors, you get goats. Now, some people may look at that and say, wow, there's a 2 in 3 chance I'm going to get a goat. I've always wanted a goat. Most people don't want goats. They want the car. a brand new Chrysler LeBaron. So you could get your Chrysler LeBaron. And granted, that car was kind of a goat, but that's a different story. Different story. So after you pick a door, Monty shows you the contents of one of the other two doors. But the trick is never the door that has a car. He's not going to show the car because there's a final stress point. And that final stress point is, dear player, you chose door number 1. I'm going to show you door number 3 has a goat. So now there's door number 1, door number 2. Are you going to stay with door number 1 or will you switch to door number 2? And, well, most people would think that if you switch from door 1 to door 2, the probability that you're going to have a car is still the same. I mean, 1 out of 3 has a car. 2 out of 3 had goats. It doesn't matter if I chose 1 or 2. That doesn't affect the probability. Well, this is the paradox. And this is the part that makes life tricky because it turns out the answer is yes, it really does. The problem is, I would say this is where you start to differentiate frequentist statistics from Bayesian statistics. And that is the addition of new knowledge. We have learned something. We did not know the contents of any of the 3 doors when we said door number 1. Now we know door number 3 is a goat. We can update our set of knowledge that says door number 3 is a goat. Door number 1 is something. Door number 2 is something. But it's not 50-50 because if door number 2 is a car, Monty will never show it. So in the world where you choose the car, yeah, either one of those doors opens up. But in the other 2 worlds, in the 2 worlds where you do not choose the car, Monty opens the door that does not have a car. So in 2 of those 3 worlds, the door that Monty has closed is the door with a car. In 1 of those 3 worlds, the door that Monty has closed has a goat because you have selected the car. So the actual probability that you will get the car if you swap to the door that Monty did not show is 2 out of 3. It is not 1 out of 3. That is counterintuitive. It kind of scratches at our brains because we're thinking in terms of static information. And this concept that, well, there was a 1 in 3 chance, so it should still be 1 in 3. Or it was a 1 in 2 chance, so either one is possible. But the math behind it actually works out. And this is an implementation in the R programming language.
Quick question. Can I go back to 1977 and get a Porsche? 2 out of 3 chances?
Don't think that they had Porsches on there. Typically, they were Chevrolets or Chryslers.
They wouldn't last until today. Never mind.
Yeah. I mean, I made the LeBaron joke, but that kind of was the style of car that they would have on these shows.
They did have I remember there was a LeBaron that was like a convertible at one point. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that you might try to save up some money for that. So I'm not going to go through the code. If you're familiar with R, if you want to play around with it, the code is here. But the whole idea, you can play a single game, pick a door, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so you picked door B. We're going to show you door A. We know A has a goat. And so one of those 2 doesn't. Or one of those 2 has the car. And if you simulate enough games of this, you will find the probability of switching after 1,000 games, he found it was 0.671. I have my own video. I'm going to drop a link to that as well. The house always wins. Yeah, the irony is that you are much more likely to win if you just follow what Monty wants you to do. Monty wants you to switch. But if you're stubborn and don't switch, you're going to lose 2 out of 3 times. And so the mean if you do not switch is that much.
Wow.
And if you extend it out, go to 100,000, a million simulations, you will in fact get to 2/3 and 1/3. Because the intuition is exactly what I was mentioning. If you want the video version of this where I dig into the details a little bit more, I did drop the link in chat because it's a fun video. It's a fun thought problem, and you can extend this out to additional doors. The challenge, basically there are 2 variants of this. One variant is open up all but one. The other variant is open up one of n-1. So in other words, if you have 3 doors, you've chosen one, and you open up one of the other 2. If you have 12 doors, you chose one, you open up one of the other 11. Now, that problem, as you get more and more doors, you get closer to unity. You get closer to it doesn't affect your result. Technically, it is always at least slightly beneficial to change a door. But at like 100 doors, the expected probability gain of switching from door 12 to door 21 is very, very low. I don't want to try to do the math off the top of my head here because I'm sure I'll get it wrong, but it's extremely low. Technically, it's above 0, though. It is always worthwhile to change. And if you have 100 doors and Monty opens 98, leaving just the door you chose and one other door, then the other door is extremely likely to have the car because you had a 1% chance up front and there were 99 other doors. He opened 98 of them. Well, in 99 out of 100 situations, you didn't get the car right. So effectively, there's a 99% chance it's behind that other door. And that's...
Is there going to be a test?
There actually will, yes. In order to log off tonight, you are going to have to answer a 6-question quiz. And question number 4 is about the DB scan algorithm. So this is the final thing tonight. This is one of those, it's neat, so I wanted to talk about it. I wouldn't generally do this in SQL Server, but it was kind of neat. It was a neat article that I found a little while ago. Tried to sneak it into last episode of Shop Talk. Didn't quite make it in. But Sebastio Pereira wants to know if you can use the DB scan algorithm in SQL Server without external tools, without using something like machine learning services. And it turns out that you can. DB scan, by the way, if you're not familiar with this is a clustering algorithm that is pretty effective. It is not extremely effective, but it is reasonably effective at picking out clusters in numeric sequences. Density-based spatial clustering of applications with noise. So they have their acronym game on point. And this is an example of one of the things that Sebastio came up with. The labels here of careless, target, standard, sensible, careful, those are things that he added in. Those are not things that dbScan will actually give you. What it will give you is if you plot out data in a multidimensional space, you can find clusters, areas where you have more data points that are close to each other than others. I guess the way that I would try to explain it is that a cluster is a combination of 2 things. A set of data points that are close to one another and where those data points are relatively far from other data points. So those are the 2 parts of what makes for a cluster. So in this example, the purple ones, the gray ones, the light brown or the orange ones in the top left, the bluish purple ones in the bottom left, these are all different clusters because they're relatively close to one another. In
This is
the
fascinating, Kevin. Wow.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's neat. Now he mentions that main use for anomaly detection. When I wrote my book on anomaly detection, I explicitly did not include dbScan because this is actually not good for anomalies. This is good for mainline systems, but is actually a challenge for anomalies because you have to define rules around how far away your cluster items are before they're considered anomalous. And so you have to have information about the distribution of data. And so in the book, I explicitly wanted to exclude as many of those algorithms as possible under the principle that I don't think it's fair to assume that your end user has knowledge of the underlying distribution of data. So if they do, then yes, you can use dbScan. You can see the little points in the bottom corners where they're little dots. They're not colored in any specific color. Those are the things that technically are considered outliers because they're not part of a single cluster.
Mm-hmm.
But figuring that out can be a challenge. And to that end, I'm not a fan of it as an anomaly detection algorithm. I am a fan of it as a clustering algorithm, as an analysis algorithm, where you might have, say, behavioral details of different groups of shoppers. And you might find that these shoppers are all clustered together in terms of their frequency of purchase or items that they purchase or time that they come in, day of the week, et cetera, et cetera. And so you might then look at who these customers are and try to describe the cluster. And one of the tricks of clustering is, can you describe the contents of the cluster? If you can, then it's probably a legitimate cluster. If you cannot, you might have a specious cluster. You might have a cluster that technically fits together because you have modeled the problem incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. Right, like a coincidence.
Yes, exactly. So if we're talking about shoppers, there may be certain characteristics like, oh, these types of shoppers, these are pregnant women. And so they're going to have certain behavioral patterns versus divorced men who probably will have different behavioral patterns. And if your cluster separates them and you can say, okay, these are the pregnant women, these are the divorced men, I understand. I might be able to find some value out of it. Finding value out of the clusters is a separate problem. That's a business problem. The technical problem of determining the clusters is of interest in this article. So Sebastio kind of gets into some of the concepts of clustering and some of the rules and things that you have to keep in mind for the algorithm, and then has an implementation in SQL Server. And I will say, when I read the article, my initial thought was, there is no way this thing can perform well, because he has a table for data, he has a table for neighbors, he has a stored procedure that is, you can see, has loops in it. But if I scroll down, insert, here we go, we have a loop. Select count star times 2 from dbScan data neighbors. You have to find all of the pairwise comparisons of data points. And you're looping through them and you're trying to figure out which ones are near each other and update the set of neighbors based off of that. So then you have geometry, the geometry data types in SQL Server to apply spatial data. And you end up with something that looks kind of like this, which is cool.
Holy cow.
And you can get that in SQL Server Management Studio. This is just a copy paste from Management Studio.
Wow.
He also had this example of male customers. I had to tweak the data. There were 2 records that I needed to change because they didn't have either annual income or spending score. I forget which. So I needed to drop those 2. But the other 998 or so, I did lay it in, and it was actually fast. It was much faster than I expected it to be. Granted, 1,000 rows isn't that many. 1,000-ish rows isn't that many. But it was enough that I thought it was going to choke. It turns out SQL Server can do this, although it may not be the best use of $30,000 per core, which is the price of licensing Enterprise Edition. You have a video of this on your channel. Yes, I do. The link above the... oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. I don't have a video of this, of DBScan. No. But I do recommend checking out Sebastio's article. He goes into a lot of detail on it and does include all of the code that you would need to futz about to try it out. So yeah, check that out. Sadly, nobody has left a comment, but it is a really cool article.
So, did you run it on your own version of SQL Server, or like an enterprise version of SQL Server?
I ran it on this machine, this desktop machine that has SQL Server 2022 Developer Edition.
Gotcha. Okay. So, all right. Because I was going to say, like, I guess it would depend on kind of what contention you have in the database, et cetera. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
No, it's a great analysis tool that is good for practice. Yes.
Yeah. Now, are there any limitations like CPU or memory? Yes, DBScan is a fairly CPU and memory intensive algorithm. That's actually why I thought it wasn't going to work very well. But I would estimate you're probably good to somewhere in the tens of thousands of data points. I haven't stress tested this, of course. I did check out the mail CSV that he mentioned, mailcustomers.csv. This particular version of it, yeah. If I click on this link, this has, let me get raw. This is about, this was only 200. I thought it was a little bit more. So this was about 200 customers, and it was only 2 dimensions. That's the other thing, is the more dimensions you have, the more stress you're going to put that SQL Server instance, or frankly, any compute instance under. Now, if you are interested in DBScan in general, there are implementations in Python. You can actually get it out of scikit-learn. So here's the documentation for doing it in scikit-learn in Python. And this would be how I would do it. But part of what Sebastio was doing was, hey, is this possible? And it is possible. It is really neat. In practice, I would probably be using the scikit-learn implementation instead, because it's going to be a bit more optimized. Frankly, it'll be a lot more optimized, because most of these algorithms in scikit-learn are, actually I could even look at the source here. They use Python, so they're really calling out to C under the cover. And
Or tidy models, Kevin.
What's that?
Tidy models might be equivalent, right, in R?
Well, tidyverse would be a lot. It's actually slower than base R.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's much more convenient and easy to understand, but technically it is slower performing.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. How about Carrot?
Carrot probably doesn't have.
I don't know. I'm just throwing out what little I know, but I don't even know if they are equivalent.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. So there is actually an R package for DBScan, and one thing that I do want to, that's where it is. One thing I do want to call out is most of the time, for many of these algorithms, you will have both R and Python versions. For a lot of the newer stuff, I see developers using Python as their implementation language, their first language.
Mhm.
Prior to this, a lot of the time you would see it in R first and then later on in Python.
Mhm.
So you have seen that switch.
Mhm.
I don't know which came out first, the scikit-learn variant or this R package, but this is an R package that you can install. And as far as performance goes, no idea, never run it. But it is there. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing screen because we are at the top of the hour. We're technically a couple of minutes over, but I think that's fine. I think we hopefully had some fun tonight, learned some things. Hopefully Mike's GoFundMe to be unfrozen will succeed, and that we'll be able to definitely skim a little off the top. But with that, all jokes aside, thank you all for coming in. And quick note that we do not have a user group meeting tomorrow. However, we do have the user group meetings second, third, and fourth Tuesdays of this month. So next Tuesday, we have a session on data observability and reliability engineering in a real-time world. Kind of apropos given our discussion of database reliability engineering, although this is kind of a data engineering and ML ops thing. Third Tuesday in person, Matt Gordon's coming into town and talking about Azure-ish SQL and Azure AI 101. And then
Who can
Matt Gordon.
Matt Gordon? Oh,
Yep.
Oh, I might go by. I might come by to say hello. I've not seen him in a while.
2 for 2. That's what Chuck
Yeah.
Woolery said.
Yes. And fourth Tuesday, the last Triangle Area SQL Server user group data science, business intelligence, and artificial intelligence session ever for the year 2025. UI, UX, and how to apply it in reports. So come check that out. We've got 3 meetings coming up. Hopefully we'll be able to see you at some of those. But until we do see each other in a future Shop Talk event or whenever, take care.
Hi.
Thanks.